Enemy shells thunder across the battlefield, throwing up clouds of debris as Major Roger Jenner dives behind cover. The muddy ground shakes violently, absorbing some of the blast and sparing Jenner from doom. Explosions ripple through the landscape. Casualties mount as the paratroopers around him fight to stay alive. The relentless shelling has fragmented their ranks, leaving them exposed and vulnerable on the open terrain. Through the chaos, Jones observes as Private Mark Hollman-Smith dashes into the open, making a desperate attempt to pull a wounded comrade to safety. Sniper fire cracks through the air. A single shot finds him mid-sprint. All eyes remain set on the building ahead of the company, a schoolhouse turned into a fortified stronghold. Inside, Argentine troops, backed by 35mm Oerlikon anti-aircraft cannons, unleash devastating fire from every window and corner. Jenner knows there's no backing out now. The paratroopers regroup and prepare to advance. With children's slides now serving as cannon mounts, even the playground has been weaponized. Just a week earlier, on May 21, 1982, British troops had landed at San Carlos Water on East Falkland with a clear mission: recapture the colony from Argentine forces determined to seize the islands and claim sovereignty from European control. Spirits were high as the ship set sail for South America. Many soldiers viewed the operation as a straightforward campaign, anticipating a swift victory and a triumphant return home. However, those expectations were quickly shattered the moment they set foot on the Falklands. The British underestimated the strength and resolve of the Argentine forces. As British troops began disembarking, squadrons of Argentine aircraft launched surprise airstrikes, inflicting devastating losses on the British Navy. Several key ships, including Atlantic Conveyor, were sunk, along with the helicopters essential to moving troops and equipment. What was expected to be a smooth advance became a logistical nightmare, leaving British forces stalled and vulnerable on foreign soil. Back in Britain, tensions mounted. The war, already unpopular in some circles, collided with a backdrop of economic hardship and public skepticism. Margaret Thatcher's government faced mounting pressure for a ceasefire, both domestically and from the international community. It became clear that the British campaign couldn't afford further delays or setbacks. A decisive land victory was needed to regain momentum and maintain public support. With time running out, Brigadier Julian Thompson, commander of the ground forces, received orders to launch an offensive against Argentine troops stationed around Goose Green and Darwin. Though some commanders questioned the strategic value of these settlements, London demanded results, turning Goose Green into the battleground for the first direct clash between British and Argentine forces. A victory at Goose Green would reaffirm the campaign and demonstrate British resolve. However, failure would not only risk the loss of the Falklands, but also threaten Britain's governmental stability. The terrain between Darwin and Goose Green was a brutal setting for a military engagement. The treeless rolling hills and dense gorse thickets provided little to no cover for soldiers on either side, exposing them to enemy fire with every step forward. Located in the southern hemisphere, the Falklands were entering winter by the time British forces landed. The cold, damp conditions made movement slow and exhausting, with constant wind and drizzling rain adding to ground challenges. On the Argentine side, Task Force Mercedes, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Italo Piaggi, controlled the area with 1,083 soldiers drawn from various units, including the 12th Infantry and the elite 25th Infantry. Piaggi's men had fortified their positions with trenches, minefields, and artillery emplacements, creating interlocking fields of fire to maximize their defense. Artillery and mortar teams were stationed to cover key access points, making any British advance a titanic effort. Among the most formidable Argentinian weapons were a battery of 6 20mm Rheinmetall anti-aircraft guns and 2 radar-guided 35mm Oerlikon cannons. These cannons, typically used for anti-aircraft defense, were repurposed for direct fire support on the ground. Their devastating power made them highly effective against advancing infantry. On the opposing side, Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Jones led the 2nd Battalion Parachute Regiment, also known as 2 Para. The brigade was tasked with spearheading the assault. However, the British were at a significant disadvantage due to the loss of helicopters aboard the Atlantic Conveyor, which left them limited mobility and deprived them of critical supplies. Forced to march across the harsh terrain, 2 para had minimal artillery support, brief moments of naval fire, and little air support. The soldiers carried only light weapons, such as rifles, grenades, and light anti-tank rockets, to push through the heavily fortified Argentine positions. Many lacked helmets, leaving them dangerously exposed to enemy gunfire. Making the operation even more difficult for British forces, Argentine forces were on high alert. A BBC radio newscast had leaked the news of 2 para's planned offensive on Goose Green the day before the attack. Piaggi and his men, now prepared for the assault, tightened their defenses and awaited the British advance. Before the formal start of the land engagement, British forces initiated their assault on Goose Green with airstrikes aimed at weakening the Argentine defenses. On the night of May 27th, under the cover of darkness, 2 para began their advances, positioning themselves for the attack. At 3:35 a.m. the following day, the battle officially commenced with artillery fire, synchronized with a naval bombardment from HMS Arrow, illuminating the battlefield with star shells and rounds of high explosives. 2 para was divided into 4 companies for the assault. A Company was tasked with leading the charge, with B Company following closely behind to exploit any breakthrough. As they advanced toward Argentine defensive positions, the open terrain made them easy targets for entrenched Argentine troops, who responded with heavy machine gun fire, pinning down the advancing paratroopers. Despite the element of surprise from the night attack, the Argentine defenders held strong, using well-prepared trenches and overlapping fields of fire to stall the British offensive. In the midst of the battle, radio operators delivered devastating news to the British troops. Sunray is down. This was the radio code signaling the fall of their commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Jones. Upon attempting to rally his troops by leading a solo charge on an enemy machine gun nest in an effort to break the deadlock, Jones was struck by enemy fire as he advanced through a gully, leaving him fatally wounded just meters from the Argentine trenches. British troops called for a casualty evacuation, but the British scout helicopter sent to retrieve Jones was quickly shot down by an Argentinian FMA IA-58 Pucara aircraft. The British were cornered. Left without a commander, 2 para was forced to regroup in the thick of battle. Major Chris Keeble took the reins of the operation, reorganizing the scattered companies and keeping the offensive alive despite dwindling morale. After hours of regrouping and another failed attempt by A Company to advance, the British finally managed to disrupt the Argentine defense after mortar crews unleashed a thunderous barrage of over 1,000 rounds onto their enemies. Explosions shook the landscape to the ground as a storm of shells fell upon the soldiers. As the smoke began to overtake the Argentine trenches, casualties rose by the minute. In a desperate bid to stop the British advance, Argentine forces called for air support. But the plan backfired spectacularly. As thick clouds began to form above the battlefield, Skyhawk fighter bombers were suddenly blinded, dropping misguided bombs that slammed into their own positions, sending fire and panic through Argentine lines as it further undermined their defenses. By now, the British regrouped, ready to storm Darwin Bridge. A Company surged forward, their boots churning through the muddy slopes. Gunfire cracked across the ridge as the British soldiers crawled for cover. After 6 hours of fierce close-quarters combat, A Company cleared the eastern end of the ridge, kicking open the path toward Goose Green. Meanwhile, B Company launched a determined assault on Boca Hill. With adrenaline pumping, soldiers hefted Milan anti-tank missiles onto their shoulders, aiming through the haze. The missiles streaked through the air before slamming right into Argentine defenses, detonating blinding flashes that tore through bunkers. The Argentine line shattered under the impact, leaving an open road for the British to take control of the hill. With Darwin Ridge secured, C and D companies could push toward Condor Airfield as freezing wind whistled through the barren terrain. B Company advanced south toward Goose Green settlement, their steps echoing the explosions of gunfire in the distance. A Company held the heights on Darwin Hill, scanning the horizon for any sign of counterattack. The advance toward Goose Green soon hit a brutal obstacle. 35mm Oerlikon cannons, concealed among the ruins, roared to life as they opened fire at C Company. Defensive explosions pushed the soldiers to the ground, forcing them to scatter for cover before being hit by the next round of gunfire. At the center of this hellish war zone stood the Darwin schoolhouse, its structure fortified with machine guns, snipers, and anti-aircraft cannons mounted on all corners. Every window served as a nest for defenders, transforming the building into a lethal fortress. From this strongpoint, the Argentine troops controlled the battlefield, pinning down any British soldier brave enough to approach. Each step toward the schoolhouse became an ordeal. Sniper fire cracked from high windows, sending paratroopers sprawling into the mud. Machine guns chewed through the open terrain, their massive rounds piercing through the air and splintering tree trunks the British soldiers used as cover. As C and D companies fought their way closer, they were caught in a bottleneck. Every attempt to advance was met with a storm of gunfire, snipers finding their targets with ruthless precision. Realizing that the schoolhouse was the key to breaking through, British commanders redirected artillery fire toward the structure. 105mm shells and Milan anti-tank missiles flew across the open field, finding their way through enemy lines and tearing through the walls of the schoolhouse in a coordinated barrage. Sea Corporal John Geddes later described the chaos, quote, "Everybody concentrated their fire on the top floor. Then we came under some horrendous fire, and I just shouted, 'Let's go.'" The schoolhouse groaned under the relentless bombardment. Bricks shattered, windows exploded outward, and thick black smoke filled the building. It didn't take long before the schoolhouse, now engulfed in flames, crumbled to the ground, forcing the Argentine defenders to abandon the stronghold. This would be the beginning of the end for their resistance. As the Argentine resistance crumbled, the defenders at Goose Green found themselves increasingly isolated. Attempts to reinforce their lines with helicopter troops were disrupted by British artillery fire, scattering the incoming units before they could solidify their positions. Meanwhile, B Company advanced relentlessly, pinning down the retreating defenders, while D Company regrouped to secure key positions. As night fell, Major Chris Keeble recognized that, although the British had surrounded the enemy, his troops were exhausted, undersupplied, and unable to sustain the fight for much longer. With the threat of an Argentine counterattack looming by morning, Keeble planned to switch strategies, offering the Argentines a chance to surrender or face a devastating final assault with all of their remaining firepower. The Argentine defenders were in a precarious position. Despite their strong defense, they were now under intense pressure from all sides, with infantry assaults and artillery fire steadily eroding their ability to hold out. Reinforcements were out of reach, and their radar systems, hampered by the rugged terrain, could only detect incoming British Harriers seconds before impact, forcing exhausted soldiers to maintain continuous shifts without rest. By the morning of May 29th, morale within the Argentine ranks had collapsed. Facing the inevitability of defeat, Commander Piaggi agreed to a ceasefire, marking the end of resistance at Goose Green. His disarmed troops, numbering nearly 1,000 prisoners of war, were taken into British custody. As the dust settled over the battlefield at Goose Green, the British claimed victory over the first land engagement of the Falklands War. While the region was not strategically essential for the overall campaign, the triumph carried symbolic significance, injecting much-needed momentum into the British forces and galvanizing morale both on the front lines and back home. One of the men from 2 Para spotted a Union flag flying outside a building. The soldiers claimed the flag, determined to carry it forward and raise it in Port Stanley once their mission was complete. On June 14, 1982, the Argentinians surrendered, and by June 15th, 2 Para became the first British unit to enter the capital city of the Falkland Islands, marking the end of the campaign. As they marched into the city, the Union flag they had carried from Goose Green flew triumphantly, signaling the victory and fulfillment of their mission. Among them was Corporal John Geddes, who recalled a defining moment, quote, "We posted the flag in Stanley, except it wasn't on a flagpole. It was on my rifle. And I still have the flag today."